Hello, everyone, and welcome to C4 NFL, the extra yard. Guess what, Mike Carlson?
What?
It's beginning to feel a lot like Christmas.
Is it? Oh, God. I hate Christmas push. It's too
What?
early.
No, it's never
only
too
December
early.
3rd.
Hey,
It's
December's
only
December.
Just finished week 13.
That's
Moving
what's
on to
scary.
Week 14.
Where has the season gone so far?
Oh, it's gone tremendously. I mean, it's really hitting boiling point now.
It sure is.
We've got another great game coming up this Sunday.
We certainly do, which of course we're going to be getting into because that is primarily what we're focused on this podcast. Mike and I will be concentrating on the weekend's forthcoming action. But before we get into that, we're going to start as we typically do with all the key news that's happened since Big Vernon Kay and I came off the air on Monday night after our highlight show. Mike, why don't you round up what's been going down?
Well, on the field, Monday Night Football, the Jets ran for 277 yards against Miami and lost 16-13. 13 was how many passes Geno Smith threw. 8 of them before the final drive of the game, 5 on the last drive. They were worth a net of 49 yards and 1 interception. The last team to do that, gain that many yards rushing and have that few yards passing and lose, was the Los Angeles Rams in 1953. So a new first for the Jets. Off the field, in the legal soap opera that is the NFL, Ray Rice was reinstated as an arbitrator ruled Roger Goodell's second suspension of Rice was arbitrary and unfair. Rice is now a free agent, though he also has an unfair dismissal claim outstanding against the Baltimore Ravens. The U.S. Senate got into the act and Goodell failed to attend the hearings on NFL players and domestic violence. U.S. Senate has nothing more important to deal with. But Senator Rubio of Florida was doing the questioning of NFL Vice President of Football Operations Troy Vincent, the former Eagle. Rubio, it should be noted, voted against extending the Violence Against Women Act as recently as 2012. Meanwhile, Adrian Peterson's reinstatement hearing starts today. Troy Vincent may have to testify here, too, after promising Peterson that the league would consider his time on the exempt list as time served. The arbitrator suggested the two sides reach a compromise before today, as Bill Cosby would say, right. The St. Louis police complained about the Ram players who did a hands-up protest in solidarity with the people of Ferguson. The police then claimed the Rams apologized on behalf of the players, but the Rams then pointed out they actually hadn't. Meanwhile, on the field, the Bengals signed tackle Eric Winston, whose unemployment is completely unconnected with his position as the acting president of the Players Association. Winston will take Andre Smith's place at right tackle. The Giants added 5 more players, including 2 starting linemen and Kiwanaka, to their 20-man disabled list, though none of them were Tom Coughlin. The Bills canceled their deal to play a game every year in Toronto. Maybe they'll do Detroit instead. And did I mention the jest? Rex Ryan said Monday he was sick. On Tuesday he said he's embarrassed. Will he add departed today? This has been a Manziel-free report.
Oh, well, it has, and impressively so. I'm Mike Carlson. May I say, unfortunately, our social media call to action this week isn't Johnny Football Free. The boys and girls on social media have been asking you guys 3 things, and we'll get through plenty of your responses throughout the course of the show. Number 1 was this. Complete this sentence, Mike. Johnny Manziel should start for the Browns against the Colts on Sunday because breaking news, and we're taping this Wednesday night, is that he won't be starting, but we'll get through some of your better answers there. The second question, who's the best bad team, as in the team below 500 in the NFL right now? And then, of course, Ask Mike. Use the hashtag Ask Mike to ask the big fella any question that isn't football related. A long-time firm fan favourite, that one, and we'll be getting into that specifically a little bit later on in the show. If you want to get in touch with us on social media, this is the way you do it, at C4NFL on Twitter and Facebook. We're on as well, facebook.com/C4NFL. Unsurprisingly, use the hashtag C4Rookie if you're new to American football, and it is great to have you with us if you are, and you got a question of the newbie-ish variety, and we'll try and answer it on the show, and if we don't, we'll answer it on those aforementioned platforms, right? Moving swiftly along.
Aforementioned. It's the only podcast that uses the word aforementioned.
Hey, there you go. First and only time I'll use that all season long. Mike, we're going to move things along. As I say, before we look ahead to the weekend, we're going to concentrate one more time on something that we learned from last week's action. This has been historically a segment known as What We Know, but Harry, the producer, in his infinite wisdom, changed it to just one thing. But you're not happy with that change, Carlson?
No, because sometimes what I know is more than just one thing.
Yeah, some rarely, but
rarely,
sometimes.
But, yeah.
Well, I'm going to make a ruling. I'm going to rule on this. I'm happy to change it back. I'm happy to change it back to what we know, just for the inherent irony of that segment name. So what we know, I'm Mike. What do we know?
Well, I think the main thing we know is that J.J. Watt will certainly be the defensive MVP of the NFL season, and if he keeps scoring offensive touchdowns, he may well be making a case for being the overall MVP. He scored one this week as a split end, as opposed to being at the normal tight end and going out. I think we also found out that Aaron Rodgers is pretty good, but we knew that already. But I just go back to one play. Great game planning by McCarthy as a coach. How do you get a mismatch against the Patriots when they're shutting down your two best receivers? You put Randall Cobb in the backfield. You run him out of the backfield. You match him on a linebacker. Rob Ninkovich did as good a job covering him as he could possibly do, but Aaron Rodgers dropped a perfect pass over his shoulder for a huge gain. To me, that was one of the real turning points of the game, one of the key plays. Jordy Nelson's sneaky fast running away from everybody was another one, obviously, but that was more Jordy Nelson and less sort of game planning. But it was a great offensive performance by the Packers in that game, and I think we learned that at home they're going to be very hard to beat.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Mike, we often criticize overreaction, and everybody's guilty of it to some degree, I think, with our generation, but sometimes it gets out of control, and I think that's something to bear in mind with two things. That game, and clearly it was an impressive win by the Packers, but absolutely don't write the Patriots off, which in some quarters they have been. Bizarrely, it's nonsense. It's one game, and it wasn't, a drubbing by any stretch. And even if it was, I wouldn't necessarily say write them off. Similarly with Colin Kaepernick. Okay, he had an absolute stinker. He's not having a great season.
Write him off.
He hasn't suddenly. Nonsense. He has not suddenly become a bad quarterback.
No, but he's never become a good quarterback, and that's the problem.
Well, it's still, okay. A, it's early doors, relatively speaking, and B, you can win a Super Bowl if your quarterback is ranked 15th or 16th in the NFL.
True. I mean, you can win a Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
They almost did, if you remember right. But they didn't in the end because he couldn't execute at the goal line.
Yes. And Alex Smith would have done.
And maybe Alex Smith would have done because you have other options than simply that fade that he couldn't throw perfectly. And it has to be thrown perfectly.
If Alex Smith had executed it wouldn't have been to a wide receiver, of course.
Maybe not. It would have, but you look to a second option perhaps. I don't know if the whole business of trying to keep him in the pocket and not run as much has affected the way he throws, or if it's simply that from the pocket he can't deal with all the different options he has. When you're running to one side or the other, it really does limit your choices. You're generally playing with half a field of reads instead of a full field of reads. It's a fascinating question because he's got such potential talent there, but right now they're just not getting the best out of him, and I think that will be a real problem for them. What's also interesting is that you now have 5 teams in the NFL with 9-3 records, all of whom are 6-0 at home, and 2 of whom I would say are going to be challenged in the run-up coming toward the end of the season, and all of whom are probably looking over their shoulders at the 8-4 Seahawks, who have just won back-to-back 19-3 games against the two other teams in their division they have to beat.
They're coming good at the right time, no doubt about that. Which 2, incidentally, do you think will be looking over their shoulders?
Arizona, for sure.
Yeah.
They're going to have a tough time the rest of the way, I think. And Philadelphia, possibly. Philadelphia, though, have Dallas in 2 weeks at home, and that'll tell us a lot.
We've got that game live on Channel 4. Looking forward to that. We also have the Patriots, the aforementioned just messing with you.
And San Diego's another team that all of a sudden, very surprisingly, is at 8-4, having beaten the Ravens in Baltimore.
That is our live game this Sunday, Mike, and it's a fascinating one. We've been a bit unlucky, I think it's fair to say, with our live games.
It's a weird, our schedule was so good that we have not seen a single one of our games flexed, and I don't think we're going to either, because the matchups have been so good all season long, and none of the games have actually been close games.
Other than the one I was ill for.
And even that wasn't that,
the scoreline was deceptive.
The scoreline was a bit deceptive. And I'm at a loss to explain why. You just wouldn't expect all these matchups between two good teams to wind up always being one-sided.
All right, well, let's look in more detail at our game on Sunday night. The 9-3 Patriots head to San Diego. They head to the West Coast to take on the 8-4 San Diego Chargers, who you would assume, Mike, are not going to win the AFC West. The Broncos will hold out, you think?
Probably, yes.
So at best a wild card, and we think in the AFC, if you're going to have a shot at a wild card, you've got to be getting a 10-6 record. So the Chargers will look at this and think it's a game that they can win. They've got the talent to win it because it's on their home turf particularly. And if you look at their run-in, do you feel they're going to need to win it to make that 10-6 record?
Well, yeah, because next week they have Denver coming into San Diego, and the week after that they play at San Francisco, which will not be an easy game. And then the good news, so to speak, is that they have to go to Kansas City.
Yes.
So that's a really tough run-in in those
Yeah.
in those 4 games, and the 2 divisional ones obviously will make a huge difference. The Patriots may have blown their chances at winning this game because a number of the players, they went to see the Clippers because Bill Belichick and Doc Rivers are close. But a number of the players went with Justin Bieber to the
Bieber.
Yeah, to the
Bieber, nice Bieber.
That's what my son called him. To the Clippers game, and I'm just starting to think. You remember what happened to Pittsburgh when they had Justin Bieber come in and into their locker room?
Oh, that's right. The
night before our game.
Yeah,
it worked really well. So
mind you, it works for Floyd Mayweather, so he's doing something right.
That's true. Yeah, I just thought maybe Phillip Rivers had sent Justin Bieber. Said, "Yeah, why don't you come down? Go see the Patriots."
Nice, sneaky. So if the Chargers are going to beat the Patriots, how are they going to beat them?
Pass rush, I think, is probably one thing. Tom Brady did a pretty good job against Green Bay. They did a nice job of controlling their rush, but Brady looked like he was having the same kind of problems he had early in the season throwing when he's not fully set. He missed one great opportunity when he actually scrambled out of trouble and then threw downfield and just threw a bad pass. And he missed on he missed on a lot of passes, which is what he was doing earlier in the season, but not so much this time. They didn't run, and running might be a problem against the Chargers. But what I think is the most interesting matchup is the Chargers' big receivers and Antonio Gates against the Patriots defense, which has been playing very well and played very well against Green Bay. They gave up yardage, but then when you got into the red zone, they became very difficult to score against. And I just wonder if the Chargers' other options, Eddie Royal, Keenan Allen, who's a big receiver himself, but tends to run a bit more, and Brandon Oliver. This could be the game where Brandon Oliver gets back to the form he showed in the first couple of games he played.
Let's talk about the Patriots run game. You mentioned it, Mike, and you think that could be the key to this one. It's well documented now how Belichick has handled Jonas Gray after his breakout performance. He missed a team practice, and has been punished. 1 carry he's had in the last 2 games. Is that going to end now? Is he going to be out of the doghouse and back in action?
It's interesting because Brandon Bolden got the touchdown carry against the Packers, which was a number of people were theorizing was Belichick just giving a big to the fantasy football players who all had LeGarrette Blount this week and all had Jonas Gray the week before.
That's entirely his rationale behind team selection.
Yeah, but Bolden is they're all basically power runners, and I'm at a loss to explain why Jonas Gray wouldn't get any carries and Bolden would. I think Blount may have more breakaway potential than Jonas Gray, but Jonas Gray certainly showed that he ran 2 holes very well, and it may just be that Belichick trusts a veteran more. It may be that he thinks Blount can find holes better than Jonas Gray. The other thing this does, though, is whenever Shane Vereen comes in, he has a tougher and tougher time getting open on pass routes because people know if Vereen's in, they're probably going to pass the ball or run a draw or something that he does well.
Yeah. Good point. Just some stats to bear in mind going into this one, Iron Mike. The Patriots are 36 wins, 4 losses since the beginning of 2003 in regular season games following a loss. So they're good bounce backers, as is their quarterback Tom Brady, 37-8 his record in games following a loss. Of course, a back-to-back road game for the Patriots. How do teams tend to manage that challenge?
Well, normally you would go home and then you would go on your road trip again, but the Patriots went directly from Green Bay down to San Diego.
What does that tell you?
Which tells me that Belichick thinks they'll prepare better, and I don't think it's a question so much of giving the team a little rest and relaxation in San Diego as actually preparing for the weather there, because it's going to be warm in San Diego on the Sunday, and it wouldn't be warm in New England where they're practicing all week. So I think the time difference is probably a less important factor to him as the weather difference, and they get to practice in the same conditions they'll be playing.
It's one less long journey, of course.
Yeah, remember Belichick brought the Patriots over for the short stay
Yeah.
when they played in London.
Yeah.
They came over on Thursday, landed on Friday, did a little workout, had a walkthrough on Saturday and played on Sunday and did very well. And I think he'd figured out that you're actually, with the 6 o'clock start, you're still more or less on early afternoon time.
Right, okay.
Your body clock.
That figures.
And it seemed to work.
Okay, we can catch us. We're on air a bit earlier this week, Mike. We've got a good build-up, 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, that
Loving
means
that.
a lot of talking.
I think, according to Jim, fans will be disappointed.
Yeah.
But there has been a lot of talking, so a good,
Here
solid
we found
build-up.
this 28-minute, 50-second video from 1964, which we'll run, and then you guys talk about it for 20 seconds.
Let's
and
do
set
that
up
instead.
The game.
Make sure you join us for that, and of course the highlight show Monday night with me and Verm will have all the week's key action. If you can't watch our live show. Now, let's dive into social media, Mike. Just to recap, 3 questions. Ask Mike will come later, so we'll concentrate on the first 2. Complete the sentence. Johnny Manziel should start the Browns for the Browns against the Colts on Sunday. Well, he's not, but we've had some good answers in here. He should start for the Browns against the Colts on Sunday because
Because if he makes that money fingers gesture one more time, J.J. Watt's going to break him in two the first time they play Houston.
Is that yours, Carlson? With the cameras constantly on him anyway, we might get to see some of the games, says Paul. That's quite a good one.
Because the internet will explode if he scores another touchdown, and ESPN has all their cameras on it.
Because the good work they've done needs to be ruined, says Adam Setters.
Since Brian Hoyer came to the Browns, they are 10-5 in games he starts, and 1-12 in games he doesn't start.
Well, that makes sense in terms of Mike Pettine's decision. He said, we think we've got a better chance of winning this game. Now, is there emphasis on this game, Mike, as opposed to moving forwards? In other words, he thinks against the Colts, the game plan, Hoyer is a better quarterback.
I think they want to control the ball as much as possible, keep Andrew Luck off the field. Now, the other interesting stat I saw on Hoyer this week was he's actually the third best passer in the NFL off play action. And the Browns run the ball, I think they're second most of any team in the league. That probably was before the Jets on Monday night.
Yeah.
But you can see what he probably has in mind. They're playing at Cleveland. So if the Browns can put the ball on the ground, control it, get their points, they put more pressure on Indianapolis to convert every possession into points, and then maybe you pick up a turnover here and there. It's the standard kind of strategy against a really good passing quarterback. And I think Hoyer does probably give them a better chance. You look at Manziel, he had he ran for a touchdown, very nice run, and then he lost a fumble, and again, no huge thing about losing a fumble, but you want to protect the ball.
Now, it's quite a mixed response from our listeners that got in touch, Mike, on it. I mean, and predictably enough, I guess. A number of people are very pro Johnny Manziel. Mike Thornton isn't one of them. Manziel's a talentless idiot who's only in it for the money and fame. I'm not sure that's altogether fair.
I get the feeling he loves playing football.
Yeah,
and I just think
loves the money and fame.
Yeah, he loves the money and fame as well. But I think his style of football is the kind of football of a guy who's just having a good time out there.
Yeah, I think I agree with that and what I've seen of him so far. Browns are winning in spite of Hoyer. Johnny could light up the offense as Scott Campbell. I think that's the key to why he has engaged people so much, Mike, and the media in particular. I mean, outside of all the baggage and the hype and nonsense that goes on around him off the field, he's an explosive player to watch. Even if it doesn't mean he's necessarily a better player than Hoyer, he's more exciting to watch, isn't he?
Yeah, and if they'd put in a more wide open offense, if they're playing in more spread formations or something like that, I would say, he would probably be better for the Browns. But if the Browns are going to play the kind of offense they've run, Hoyer's probably the better bet. And then you always have the option of going to Manziel, if you need to. For an instant explosion of points. Whereas if you start Manziel and he gets into trouble, Hoyer's not really the guy you want if you're down 2 scores, say in the second half, and you need to throw the ball downfield pronto in order to get those scores, you probably would rather have Manziel than Hoyer in that situation.
Tebow time.
Tebow time, exactly.
Yeah. Hey, I like this one. Ian definitely wins the prize for the most cynical answer to this one. It's better if this whole experiment is ended sooner rather than later. A bit hard.
I hate being out cynical.
I know, you can't out cynical Mike Carlson on this show, people. What are you trying to do? All right, terrific stuff. Thank you all for getting in touch with those. Before we look in the other games this weekend, Mike, let's have a look at some of the answers we've had in terms of the best team with a 500 record or worse. Before we do, a C4 rookie. Well, it's connected. Why? It'll make sense, Carlson, in a minute. Cynical one. You're just trying to crank up the cynicism after you've been out cynicized. Jamie Todd Jamie uses the hashtag C4 rookie. What does below 500 mean? He asks. See,
500 record is percentage. Actually, 500 is not a percentage; it's a percentage of 1,000. But it's
you see, concentrate on the answers instead of being so smart.
But it's basically an under five, under.
A team with a losing record.
An under-even record.
Jamie is what it means. Okay. Marty reckons the Rams are the best team under 500.
That's an interesting one.
They beat the Seahawks, Broncos,
certainly
and the 49ers.
better. And they've beaten good teams, which is what they did last year as well, but they lose to not so good teams. I think Mark Barron, strangely enough, has actually made a big difference to them defensively, even though he's not actually sort of the starter. But it gives them the freedom to do a lot of things in terms of sub packages, which let them cover passes better because he's in effect acting as a linebacker.
Mike, a lot of people have gone with the Rams. Actually, the more I look at the bits of paper in front of me, Adam has, Adrian says the Rams as well. Mike, the St. Louis Rams. Scott Campbell, the Rams by a long way. What a D, he says. Best team, less than 500, got to be the Rams, says David. So they seem to be the runaway winner with that. My favourite answer is James Daly. He's gone with the Bears.
Well, that's a tough one.
What?
I'm surprised more people haven't gone with the Saints.
Oh, well, true. Good point.
Because I think the Saints will probably take that division.
Yes, I do as well.
And
could be
the interesting one at
well,
500 is Houston.
Yeah.
And Houston is a tantalizing team because I think they could win more games in that division. And it all depends. If Ryan Fitzpatrick plays the way he played last week, they could actually challenge the Colts, although they're 2 games back of the Colts with 4 to play, so that's tough. But I just don't think you can count on Ryan Fitzpatrick playing that way again.
Yeah, throwing 7 touchdowns this weekend. You never know, right?
I'd settle for 4. I'm sure they would as well.
Well, they are playing the Jaguars, so it is possible.
It's possible.
Go Jaguars, of course. They bounced. What a win that was against the Giants. Now, did the Jaguars win that game, or did the Giants just throw it away?
The Giants more lost it, I think, is just like the Ravens more lost the game against the Chargers.
Which of the games featuring AFC teams? It can be an all AFC matchup or an AFC.
Well, I mean, we've already gone through the Indy Cleveland, which is actually a very interesting matchup. Buffalo at Denver is kind of interesting, but I think Denver's going to
Buffalo's still in the hunt,
favorite for that. Pittsburgh Cincinnati is probably the toughest one to pick. They're at Cincinnati. The Bengals at 8-3-1 are now ahead of all the 8-4 teams, playoff wise. So that's an interesting point there. And the Steelers have just been. They are the Saints, I think, of the AFC. Not quite as bad defensively as the Saints, but basically you just don't know who's going to show up. And just when you think they have them figured out, then they go out and they either play really well or they stink the joint up.
Well, that's definitely true. 2 teams that are very hard to work out. The Chiefs play against the Cardinals. Of course, that's obviously not an AFC versus NFC matchup, but the Chiefs are, I guess, going to look to bounce back after
and the Cardinals ditto. So that's a good matchup. And the other AFC one that's interesting and a little under the radar is Baltimore at Miami.
Yes,
both teams 7-5. If a loss here makes it very tough.
It would
for
be game
either
over.
team. And Miami is coming off 16-3 over the Jets. Is not an impressive performance by any means, but they did go to the passing game and it sort of worked. I think Baltimore is going to be
16-13
tougher for them, but of course Miami's at home.
Yes, both at 7-5. So as you say, Mike, a loss would not mathematically but logically seem to put them out of the playoff hunt. You like the Ravens this year, don't you? You think they're...
I thought they were coming good. I was surprised that they lost to the Chargers.
Only just, of course.
Only just, and I still am not convinced by that pass interference penalty. Although I know a lot of people were. Not all of them Ravens fans.
Yeah, well, true. No, I mean, it's one of those ones that we see all the time, that the receiver gets the benefit of the doubt. It's a pick 'em, and the defensive player is going to get penalised.
Yeah, to me, the defender had position, and once he turned around, it was all the contact was then on the receiver. So, but that's the way the game goes.
Incidentally, Mike and I were chatting about this off air just before we started taping the show. Steve Smith, also known as Steve Smith Senior, of course, this season. Now of the Ravens, for a long time of the Panthers. Terrific interview with him in Sports Illustrated a few weeks ago, the issue of Sports Illustrated, which you can find online, that interview. He's a fascinating character, Mike. I mean, he's lasted, 13 years in the NFL now. He's one of the top 15, top 20 receivers of all time in terms of passing yardage. Probably the best Carolina Panther in the history of that franchise. I'd imagine he's a good bet for a Hall of Fame.
It'll be an interesting one.
Long list.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one because his stat line would probably be better. I mean, it's a two-way argument. Most of his career in Carolina, he was the only receiver.
Right.
But which means probably more coverage. He probably had more double coverage than most receivers in the league. On the other hand, he also had more targets than most receivers in the league.
Yeah.
But it's a double-edged sword. But I remember Steve Smith coming out of Utah and seeing him at the Senior Bowl and just thinking he ate everybody up. And I thought this guy was going to... And if I remember right, he went in the third round of the draft.
That's right, yeah.
So he was a real steal.
The perception of him, of course, because of his on-field antics, he likes to jaw it, doesn't he? And he's always mixed it up, even though he's a little guy.
He said when he went to the Ravens, he said, they're kind of like the aggressive, kick you when you're down kind of team I want to play for.
Yeah, right. But he's a very, well, I was going to say as smart and cultured cookie as though his on-field persona would suggest otherwise. But he really is. I mean, he's very well travelled, very well read, very smart business guy. A really, really interesting character, and well worth the read, that interview. Loving Steve Smith, and I hope he plays for a few more years yet. Right, Mike, before we get into the NFC, and I'm particularly looking forward to your take on the Cowboys-Bears, which is a fascinating matchup.
I'm glad it's not on Thanksgiving.
We're gonna. How did your Thanksgiving hosting duties go, Mike?
It was fine. I had a great time at the Sports Bar and Grill in Farrington.
There you go. Yeah. Did you get heckled much, or?
Not too much, no.
I knew we should have turned up.
No, I lost my voice, though.
You
might have noticed on Sunday.
You were a bit husky on Sunday.
Yeah.
A bit husky. We got you some hot water and lemon in the studio with a bit of honey to keep you going. No, you had some Fisherman's Friends or some sort of throat sweets with you on Sunday.
Yeah, they're really good.
They were hardcore. All right, Mike, we're going to do Ask Mike now. Are you ready for that?
Yep.
This is where we ask the big fella any questions that you sent in to us via the social media channels that aren't sporting related. Are you ready to rock?
Yep.
Let's do it then. Would you emerge victorious, asks Malk Walker, if Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Napoleon Bonaparte, and Boris Johnson played a game of Risk? So it's Carlson v. them.
Now, Risk, I remember when I was in college, there were guys who were addicted to playing Risk. And, they would have these all-night games.
Would money change hands?
I don't think they actually gambled on it. I would guess that unless Genghis Khan sort of started chopping heads off, like Boris Johnson's, which would be fun to watch. I would guess that it would come down to Caesar and Napoleon, and I think Caesar was probably the top politician among the bunch.
You're playing as well, though, aren't you? Oh no,
I'm not.
I misunderstood the question.
Yeah, if I was playing, I'd get out of there.
Yeah, you wouldn't win that.
I'd say I'll go make the popcorn, guys.
Yeah, that figures. Who would stand the best chance of winning the Grand National, asks Mark Swindells. Tom Brady riding Gronk or David Beckham riding Adebayo Akinfenwa?
I wonder if they'd have to give some weight there. I'd take Brady riding Gronk.
It's an interesting image, and maybe a
I see this as being sort of like a Ben-Hur chariot race.
Nice. I like that. Best sporting event, Andrew wants to know, that you've attended. We'll allow an occasional sporting question. Non-football, I guess we should be specific. Outside of American sports. The best sporting event outside of American sports that you've attended.
Yeah. Maybe the Dream Mile in Oslo, the year Steve Cram broke the world record, and I was inside on the track watching that, and I've never seen anybody move like that. I was in Barcelona. I mean, the other things that sort of stick with me, I was in L.A. In the Coliseum when Mary Decker and Zola Budd collided, and in Barcelona when Derek Redmond's dad came out of the stands, which is still one of the greatest things I've ever seen, in any sporting event. And I've been at a couple of fights, boxing matches.
I'm glad you clarified that.
Which were extremely memorable.
Yeah.
Cooney Spinks was one. Barry McGuigan winning the title was another. Lloyd Hunnigan another. And there's nothing like
Mickey
a boxing
Rourke the other
match.
week.
Mickey Rourke. There's nothing like a box. I mean, I wrote a piece for the Americarnage website about when they stole the decision from Sweet Pea Whitaker in Paris. I was at that one.
You were at that one. Kind of side or tangential question. Adam Nichols, what is your favourite sporting event that you've covered as a broadcaster?
Yeah, some of those I actually have covered. He mentioned the Miracle on Ice, but unfortunately when the Miracle on Ice happened, I was driving film from Lake Placid to Montreal Airport and back, and I was listening to it on the radio in French. So it wasn't quite the same.
Do you speak French?
Yeah, I can speak Quebecois. But
Let's do the rest of the
if
show
you look
in
at
French,
those
Mike.
photos, the famous photo of the guys with the flag wrapped around them in front of the goal, and you look into the crowd, you'll see a big bearded guy with a check shirt and up celebrating, and he's the guy who's in my seat. He was my other producer.
There you go. Michael German, out of you and Nat, who would stay longer in the jungle on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here?
Nat, for sure.
You reckon?
Yeah.
Oh, blimey. Is that because you just probably walk off?
I would piss off too many people.
You would piss off too many people, that's true. Union or league, asked James Gregg. Sporty One will allow it. Rugby union or rugby league?
I have to say that I find union the more interesting game because it's got more dimensions to it. Although it's now being played much like American football in 1922, with the flying wedge and stuff like that. It's very much reminiscent of that.
Okay, final one, big man. Wayne wants to know the favourite city you've ever visited.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Is Telford a city?
Is Telford a city? That's an old one. I would say probably Copenhagen or Barcelona in Europe.
Yeah.
Vegas. And Vegas. I'm torn between New Orleans and San Francisco in the U.S. and Delhi.
Ooh, an interesting mix.
But and I don't count Montreal because I lived there. I didn't visit.
That doesn't count. Yeah. We had fun time in New Orleans. I still have flashbacks of us singing karaoke on Bournemouth Street. Mustang Sally, I think it was.
Yes.
God forbid anybody that was in the bar that night. Right, let's move things back to football. Terrific stuff. Thank you for the NFC. Thanks for all your Ask Mike questions. Keep them coming in. Use the hashtag Ask Mike on either of the social media platforms, and we'll try and get through them on next week's show. NFC. Well, let's start with the game I plugged. The Cowboys Bears. The Bears are done, of course. Does that mean? What does it mean? Does it mean Trestman's done? Does it mean Cutler's done?
That's going to be an interesting situation. Mel Tucker's under a lot of pressure. I think Trestman's under a lot of pressure as well. And to me, I think the problem is that Jay Cutler and Trestman just can't get on the same page.
They started the Thanksgiving game so well, Mike.
You would have thought, and then it just wore out. Detroit did a good job adjusting defensively, I thought.
Yeah.
And Dallas on the road, though, are no sure things to romp through this game. And, I think one thing that Trestman doesn't seem to do very well is adjust during the game. And that could be crucial for him and for his offense. The big game, though, has to be Seattle at Philadelphia.
Sure.
And that's, a classic matchup. Not only it goes back to Big Ten when Pete Carroll was coaching USC and Chip Kelly was coaching Oregon.
Yeah.
They had a number of battles which Chip Kelly tended to come out on top of.
I think ding dong is the technical term.
Yeah, although you'd probably argue that Pete Carroll had the better personnel most of the time.
The Seahawks 8-4, of course. The Eagles 9-3. What was remarkable, I felt, about the Eagles, bearing in mind what we know about Chip Kelly and the pace of his offense, was just how fast they came out of the traps during the Thanksgiving game.
Yeah, much too fast for the Cowboys. And this will be a better test for them because Seattle's defense has really adjusted well. And if they can speed things up, they might be able to wear down that line. Because remember, Kevin Williams is now starting at defensive tackle, and he was supposed to be just at his age a rotation player to help keep the other guys fresh. But with me being out and Red Bryant gone, they're not the force up front that they were.
Yes.
The defensive backfield though was really playing well, and getting Bobby Wagner back, I think, to me, not many people are talking about it, but he makes them stronger in a couple of ways. One is they get to move the other guys back to the linebacker position where they belong, and the other is that he's such an exceptional middle linebacker in coverage, as well as being a great tackler and plugger. So that makes life a whole lot better, because now you've got all your linebackers. You can stay in base, and all your linebackers can cover a tight end. Probably better than most teams do. And what Chip Kelly will be doing, I think, is looking for ways to isolate players who are faster than tight ends on these linebackers, because what you run up against up the middle is when you complete passes up the middle, you then get racked by Kim Chancellor or what. But also, if you watch Seattle, they play a lot of what amounts to a 4-4 defense with Chancellor playing as a linebacker.
Yeah.
So then they're splitting the field. They're playing often 2 man-to-man corners and a free safety, Earl Thomas, who's just free. So it's single coverage. Usually teams love to see just single up top, and they can throw against it. But again, those linebackers do such a good job on the slot and tight end receivers that teams don't get free on that.
Terrific analysis, Mike, there. 9-3. If you look at that Eagles record, is that surprising? If they played well enough to deserve that record, do you think?
I think they deserve the record. I picked them to win the division at the beginning of the year. I think that they're sorely tested against top defenses. And that is down partly to the extra game planning that goes on in the NFL, because it's a full-time job, and partly to the extra physical skill of the players. But what Chip Kelly's got the Eagles doing, I think, is playing with a bit of fire, which they sometimes didn't. And there's always the temptation to think, well, Mark Sanchez will regress back to being Mark Sanchez against a really good defense. So this is a fascinating thing. I mean, is Pete Carroll in Mark Sanchez's head because he was his college coach? Does he have faith that he can break him down, as it were? I'm really looking forward to that one.
Absolutely right. And Falcons-Packers, the Monday night game, I think is interesting as well. Not least because the Falcons and the Saints, as we've discussed, are in a two-way fight to try and lose the NFC South between them. And of course, I think at this stage, if the Falcons drop to 5-8, bearing in mind the Saints, you would assume, although they've been obviously very erratic at home recently, they host the Panthers.
Well, yeah,
so
if they lose to Carolina, you might as well bring Rex Ryan in as head coach of the Saints and start all over again.
Well, quite. So you assume they'll win that game and go to 6-7.
Atlanta, though, traditionally are just so bad on the road.
Yeah.
They're just a different team on the road. And up in Green Bay, I just can't see them beating the Packers.
Okay, so that's the Monday night game, as I say. It's just a reminder that our game Sunday night, Patriots-Chargers, a 1:30 a.m. kickoff. We're on air, I think, it's 5-1 we're on air, Carlson, from what I've
5-1. Ooh, that's a good build-up.
A lot of build-up, which is good. Okay, Mike, before we get out of Dodge, and remember we've got one to watch. We've each got to pick one player to watch from this weekend's action. But before we do that, a serious question from Rob Udall about concussion, which is obviously something that is talked about a lot in relation to the NFL. And it's an open-ended question in many respects. When is concussion in sport really going to be taken seriously, Rob asks? And I guess with rugby, it seems to be gaining a bit of traction as a possibly significant issue in the future. In the NFL, of course, people have been taking notice for a few years now because of players that have suffered injuries that are thought to be a direct result of concussion, and research into it, which previously was unavailable, and that's now come to light, which has changed perception about it. So what do you think is the future moving forwards for contact sports and the issue with concussion?
I think the NFL, more so than rugby, but there's similar problems, faces a real crisis in the next 5 or 6 years as to the level of contact and whether it's deemed too dangerous, and we've had this already in boxing, for example. And in rugby, as I said, I watch rugby now, and it seems to me much more like American football in the early days, formative days, when you have players standing up in the ruck and guys come in and clean them out, it looks just like American football. And the players are so much bigger now, for whatever reason you may wish to consider, around the world of rugby. But, when I came to Britain in 1977, rugby was being played by guys who were basically average. Some were big, but they basically looked like average guys.
The props are always big fellas.
Yeah, and now, and some of the back row forwards were big and all. But now everybody is big and everybody is professional and everybody
that's
is
a lot to do with it, of course.
2 stone heavier or 1 stone heavier than they would normally be, because
all muscle.
Whatever. And
weight training.
So the
professionalization of it is a significant reason for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you take the mass times velocity equals impact equation, that explains a lot of the problem. Now, the good thing in rugby is you don't get so much head-to-head contact as you do in football, but as has been pointed out, the whiplash effect on a lot of hits has just as damaging an effect to the brain as
so what will happen, because boxing is an interesting example, because
they shortened fights.
It's fundamentally the same, though, isn't it?
Yeah. It's still fundamentally the same, and
so you
and amateur boxing is, with the best will in the world, not as interesting to watch.
Yes, yeah. So you'll assume that maybe additional safety measures like the banning helmet-to-helmet contact will go in, but fundamentally things won't change.
Fundamentally not, but I mean you can see right now already the impact the helmet ban has had. And penalties are called on things that I believe would be inadvertent, or not illegal, strictly speaking.
Isn't it worth it?
But you see players trying to go lower on on tackles quite a bit, and you don't see very much spearing, which was when I was playing was commonplace, not aimed at the head usually, but even at the body. But you just don't see that much of it anymore. Guys leading with the head the way they used to.
Yeah, which has to be a good thing.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, good question. Thank you, Rob. Mike, before we get out of here, one to watch. Who are you going for? Which player this week?
I think the real key to the weekend, the guy who I'm most interested in seeing how he performs, is Mark Sanchez.
Right.
I think he needs to have another good game, which means making decisions quickly and getting the ball accurately, and those have been the two problems he's had. And I think this week will be the real test for him, because Seattle's defense is for real.
Hey, I've just seen a good stat crop up on Twitter. In 25 games with the Colts, this is from Andrew Siciliano, NFL writer. In 25 games with the Colts, Trent Richardson is averaging 36.1 yards a game.
All right. That's worth a first-round draft pick in my book.
He's not my one to watch, though. I'm going to stick to our game, Mike. Philip Rivers is the player I'm going to watch. We mentioned earlier how important it is for the Chargers to win this game. I think he's had a very good season, and I think he's gone under the radar for a lot of it. And I think primetime football, Rivers, is he going to be, and somebody asked this question, I think, on our show on Sunday night, the best quarterback that never wins a Super Bowl? Well, he's got to win again on Sunday against the Patriots in his own backyard, and if the Chargers are going to make the playoffs this year and have a shot at that, so Philip Rivers is my player to watch.
I think people don't realize how tough Philip Rivers
100%
is.
agree.
And they look at him because of the facial expressions or whatever, sort of as a pouty or
it's the Cutler vibe, isn't it?
Cutler vibe, but he is such a tough player. Yeah. He hangs in there, and his teammates appreciate that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. He played in a torn ACL, didn't he? In championship game a few years back. All right, great stuff. Terrific work on Mike Carlson, as ever. Always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you all.
See you on Sunday night.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I will look forward to that. Thank you all for getting in touch with us and for downloading and for keeping us high in the iTunes charts. We like that.
Yes.
Let's get back to number one, though. I'm sort of satisfied with
you
top
guys
10,
disappoint me sometimes.
Yeah, you don't want to disappoint. I'm Mike. Get us back on the top spot. At C4NFL is our Twitter handle, C4NFL on Facebook if you want to get in touch with the show. But until next week, from me, Nat Coombs, and I'm Mike Carlson, we'll see you later.
You've been listening to C4NFL The Extra Yard with Nat Coombs and Mike Carlson. It's a Nemo Interactive production for Channel 4, and the producer was Harry Holgate.